Hello and welcome to my 2024 post-Highlander rework comprehensive guide. This is a Highlander guide that aims to teach Highlander at every level possible, ranging from low level, so if you're completely new to For Honor or the character, I will be going over his kit, his punishes, his feats and his perks, ranging all the way to high level and even some competitive tricks. I hope you enjoy. If you're curious about my credentials and qualifications for Highlander, you'll be able to see them on the screen now. Okay, so let's begin with the absolute basics. Highlander is a hybrid class hero in the Viking faction. He has 125 base HP and 120 stamina, which is pretty average for the For Honor cast. It's nothing special. So now I'm going to move on to Highlander's kit. He's well known for having two stances, namely offensive and defensive stance. I'm going to begin by covering defensive stance, and then I'm going to move into offensive stance, because the former is much simpler than the latter. Okay, so in defensive stance, Highlander has the following moves: light, light, heavy chain, heavy, heavy chain, a light, heavy chain, a 3-part zone that can be feinted at all parts. As you can see on screen right now, the third hit of the zone attack chains into Highlander's heavy finishers, which then chains into the zone again, creating an infinite chain whose primary purpose is for minion clear. Highlander also has a dodge forward heavy soft feint, and a side dodge heavy, all of which again chain into Highlander's finisher heavy. And as you've probably noticed by now, every heavy attack, as well as Highlander's zone attack, all have hyper armor, the startups for which, as well as the other relevant statistics, will be shown on the screen momentarily. Okay, so now I'm going to begin to discuss Highlander's other stance, which is offensive stance. To enter this stance, press and hold heavy. And you will notice a few things. Firstly, you'll hear a sound cue, which is this iconic line. Done my glass! You will also see Highlander change his guard to a position where the sword is now behind him as opposed to being in front of him. And you will also notice that the white widgets that you use for guard direction have faded out, meaning that he no longer can block. And additionally, if you pay even closer attention, you should be able to see a sort of red glow traveling up and down the weapon every now and then. These indicate that he is in stance, and the red glow indicates that you can be guard broken, as with other stances such as Sheldon's Chi stance, or when Meje changes his weapon form, for example. Alright, now that you have learnt the basic way of entering offensive stance, it's important that you learn the other ones, as this way is quite slow and easily interrupted. There are 3 main ways used by Highlander players to get into offensive stance, and those being feinting into offensive stance, fast flowing after landing any attack except for your heavy finisher and the first 2 parts of your zone, or landing a parry. These last 2 options are in particular more popular than the first, as they are considered much safer as the enemy is in hit stun, therefore it will take them longer for them to interrupt you, and this can allow you to get in and attack. So I'll show you his basic kit first. Highlander's offensive kit seems quite simple, but when you put everything together, it forms an extremely powerful kit. So this is his kit. Light, heavy, feintable kick, caber toss, dodge forward caber toss, and side dodge heavy. Now, his kit may sound very simple in offensive stance, but let me explain why it's so powerful. You see, Highlander's lights are all enhanced, meaning that they're not stopped on block. This allows him to continue to put on the pressure with these lights, as they are 400 ms on all sides, meaning they are nigh unreactable or completely unreactable. And their very low stamina cost allows them to be used in very quick succession, and their low recovery also allows for a variety of other defensive options. Next, all of his orange attacks are linked in some way. His heavy, his kick, and his caber can all be linked through soft feints. The soft feints that Highlander has are heavy to kick to caber, and heavy to kick to caber, which, given that the kick and the heavy are both feintable, can lead to some very nasty pressuring and conditioning, especially while out of stamina. If you find yourself with an out of stamina opponent as Highlander, just get into offensive stance and start using those scary orange attacks to get them on the floor for your punish. Now, some of these inputs, especially the ones involving his heavy, such as offensive heavy or offensive side dodge heavy, can be a little tricky to get the first time round, so what I would recommend is just going into the training mode or going with a friend and just practicing these inputs until you can do them consistently. Okay, so now I'm going to move on to Highlander's punishes. They're quite simple generally. On a heavy parry, you get a light from any direction. Alternatively, you can do a crushing counter for 18. However, these are easily baited, so be careful. For a guard break, you get a top heavy. However, you must throw it as fast as possible. If you delay it even slightly, it can be blocked. The punish for a light parry and a wall splat are the same, being a side heavy. However, just like with guard breaks, on light parry, you need to watch out, you need to throw it as early as possible, otherwise it's blockable. For a out of stamina parry or a revenge parry, you get light into defensive stance top heavy, and in out of stamina throw, it's the same damage. And finally, we have Highlander's out of lock punish. This one is either 2 defensive heavies or Celtic Curse into heavy finisher. Another thing I would like to mention is that Highlander's zone has very low guard break vulnerability, and on a correct read, you can use it to beat a guard break attempt, netting you 18 damage potentially into your offensive stance if you make the correct read. So having discussed things like Highlander's basic kit and his punishes, I'm now going to go over his perks and feats, and I'm going to explain what I think are the best choices. Okay, so for feats, in Tier 1, Highlander has Rush, Body Count, and Fast Recovery. In Tier 2, he has Bear Trap, Inspire, and Winner's Advantage. In Tier 3, he has Second Wind, Longbow, and Fury. And for Tier 4, Highlander has Spear Storm, Fire Flask, and Champion's Aura. And for perks, Highlander is very lucky as he gets defense perks. Aegis, Shields Up, Bastion, Vengeful Barrier, Last Stand, refresh focus and bulk up. Personally, with regards to feats, I would like to run Rush, Inspire, Fury, and Fire Flask, and for perks, I like Bastion, Vengeful Barrier, and Last Stand. Although lately, I've also been leaning towards Aegis over Bastion. Welcome to the intermediate section of this Highlander guide. By this point, I already assume that you have a basic knowledge of Highlander, surrounding his kit, his feats, perks, and punishes. In this section of the guide, I wish to discuss spacing, mix-ups, matchup knowledge, some basic techs, and Highlander's offensive emote. Let's talk mix-ups. Highlander in offensive stance is well known for his ability to condition and apply pressure to an opponent through his variety of mix-ups, be it his ability to pepper someone with offensive lights, or his high damage kick mix-ups. To this end, your primary mix-up is going to be heavy into kick, as this is a high damage unblockable, followed by a feintable bash, which also confirms that same high damage unblockable, which also then can lead into a caber, meaning Highlander forces the opponent into making the correct read. It's very scary to go against this mix-up, as you can be eating anywhere from 24 to 27 damage, with Highlander being able to go right back into this mix-up. Due to his low stamina consumption ever since the rework, this mix-up is very scary due to his ability to do it repeatedly. Additionally, once you've started to condition people more heavily with your kicks, people will start to pre-dodge them. To catch this, you can delay your kick ever so slightly so that the kick lands by the time they've finished their dodge, and this catches them, as you'll be able to see in the clip now. Alternatively, as you also saw in the clip, if they pre-dodge your kick, you can also catch them with the dodge forward caber, which provides this move some use as an offensive punish beyond a roll catcher. Now if you have an opponent out of stamina, Highlander's soft feint mix-ups in offensive stance become downright cruel, as they are forced to make very committal reads due to the inability to dodge attack. Therefore, kick to caber also becomes an incredibly potent mix-up while out of stamina. However, you also have to consider that kick to caber gives the enemy back their stamina, so just be careful with using it too early in your out of stamina pressure. Speaking of kick to caber, I will now tell you which characters can be caught. Kick to caber can catch Warden, Conk, Raider, Lawbringer, Shogoki, Valkyrie, Gladiator, Warmonger if she does the dodge bash, Peacekeeper, Nobushi with hit stun, Shinobi if he single dodges or is in heavy hit stun. If the Shinobi double dodges, use heavy caber to catch, JJ with heavy hit stun and the infamous triple soft feint, and Varangian Guard. Now, heavy to kick can catch all of these, provided they early dodge, as well as a few others, those being Black Prior, Warlord, Yorm, and it's easiest to achieve this from crushing counter hit stun. Having discussed Highlander's primary offensive mix-ups, I will now go into depth about Highlander's spacing. Spacing is a vital part of Highlander's gameplay, as his neutral is so bad that he cannot afford to get hit and put back in defensive stance, as he would have to put in a lot of work to get back to his offense. Therefore, I would like to discuss Highlander's primary spacing tools that we have nowadays. So firstly, we have Highlander's back offensive light. This is an old one that's been used since very early in Highlander's history, and it's used due to its low recovery, good backwards movement, low stamina cost, and general safety. Alternatively, there is also Highlander's neutral back heavies. A little bit riskier as these are still parryable. However, they can hit big damage on someone who isn't expecting it, or they can allow you to safely fast flow to offensive stance after being blocked. Okay, so now I'm going to move on to discuss Highlander's offensive emote. Now, if you've studied a Highlander main before, you'll notice that they will often emote in offensive stance between attacks. This isn't to be BM, it's actually a useful tool in many strategies and high-level techs. The main purposes of the offensive emote are to bait a reaction, mask an animation, such as a guard switch, or shorten a recovery, such as offensive stance cancel, which is something I will touch upon in the next segment. Welcome to the high-level section of this guide. At this point, I assume you have a good knowledge of Highlander and For Honor in general. These tips will help you elevate your gameplay to the next level and potentially even serve as an entree into Highlander at a competitive level. In this section of the guide, I will be covering hit stun, frame, stance cancel techs, gags, and other miscellaneous techs. Highlander is quite fortunate in that he is able to retain frame quite often. This is particularly useful for Highlander because when he has frame, he can kick safely without the risk of being light interrupted. The enemy needs to be in medium hit stun or higher for the kick to be an uninterruptible attack. This means that the only moves in which Highlander cannot safely kick are his neutral light and his offensive light. And if you're feeling really spicy, you can use this to your advantage to bait and punish light interrupt attempts for heavy damage. Okay, so now I'm going to discuss stance cancelling, which is effectively the bread and butter of any high-level Highlander. You will have probably noticed by now that the normal method to exit offensive stance is just far too slow. You find yourself getting hit by things. So now I'm going to show you the main ways to cancel quicker so you can get that light interrupt for your TikTok clips. Firstly, there is the quick cancel, wherein you switch guards after performing an action to exit offensive stance faster. Additionally, there is also the emote cancel, where you do the offensive emote and then cancel for an instant exit. Alternatively, there is the light quick cancel, where you switch guards almost during the animation of the offensive light, and you can use this to cancel immediately. This makes Highlander's offensive lights very safe, as you can block or even parry certain dodge attacks, provided you are buffering the cancel input. Now that I've discussed Highlander's cancel tech, I'm going to begin to discuss his other offensive or defensive techs. And then I will move on to some weird techs that are situational, or we're still learning about them in the high-level Highlander community. The most common offensive tech that Highlander has is the Neo Flicker, more commonly known as the magic tech, wherein he can make his offensive lights pretty much completely unreactable. To teach this tech, I first need to teach something else, which is the emote spin. To achieve this, hold the emote button and spin your guard around to make Highlander spin in a rather comical way. This might be a joke to most players, but it's pivotal that you understand how this works to properly achieve magic tech. Okay, so for magic tech, you use your emote spin to switch guards, quickly switch back, and then throw a light attack. This used to be Highlander's only option due to its incredibly difficult to react to, it's still incredibly difficult to react to, making this a very viable option, especially if you plan to put on pressure with lights, as Highlander can have a very high DPS with those lights. And you can use this peppering of magic lights to condition your opponent into trying to parry that offensive light. And once you predict that he's going to start doing that, throw an offensive heavy in order to catch them off guard. Or you could do what my friend Jorari does and mix up the timing of your offensive lights by putting a small delay between them. This also has the potential to really mess with someone's rhythm. Another common strategy that remains from old Highlander days is to back dodge after an offensive heavy and then buffer a kick. This works because usually enemies will try to close the distance with you, especially if you're low stamina, and you can use their over-aggressiveness to your own advantage and get a 26 damage kickoff. Now, the last tech I want to discuss is a tech that us high-level Highlanders, we're still learning about it. It's called the Weird Dash, and I first seen it accomplished by WispFam, whose link I will put up in the description. I will now show you a clip of Weird Dash, and I will attempt to explain based on what he said about it. However, do know that so far we only know that this can be replicated on a PlayStation controller. According to WispFam, all you need to do is dodge, do an emote spin, and then apparently it should just force you out. And this allows you to parry lights as you dodge forward with the same speed as pre-rework. However, most of this is still very new information. We don't know if this tech is doable on other platforms. However, we have seen WispFam perform it consistently. So now I'm going to talk a little about Highlander's ganks. Now, he doesn't really have any ganks of Zone that are particularly special or viable, so right now I'm just going to mention the most famous ganks that you can take part in. Obviously he has his generic ganks. I'm going to link ZZ Explorer's video on generic ganks for you to watch at your own pleasure. Additionally, there's the infinite Haber gank, one that has existed since effectively day one of Highlander. I will put a video of that on screen now. Additionally, if Highlander is in offensive stance, he can take part in the Medjay gank, as he can do a pseudo heavy light chain. But beyond that, there's really nothing special. Alright, so that's the end of this Highlander guide. If you found any of this useful, feel free to like, subscribe, and share this video with your friends. I hope you enjoyed watching, and have a good rest of your summer, or whenever you're watching this, have a good day.